Right, I clicked the go live just to give us an opportunity to get up there before we get started. So we will be live in just a second. If you do have it on a YouTube, like if you have YouTube out there, it is delayed and your sound, just make sure your sound is off YouTube.
Okay, we don't have any sound, so.
Yeah.
Of course, my computer's starting to go slow on me. Okay. All right, and then I'm gonna share my screen.
Perfect. We are so excited to have you guys here with us this evening. Hopefully, we're going to get started here in just a second. We are very fortunate to have two local celebrities here with us, Ms. Sparks and Ms. Dickerson. So they are both representatives from UK and U of L, and they'll kind of go through their introductions here in just a second. But we are super excited to have them here with us this evening. And at this time, I wanted to let you know, in order to ask questions, you can do that through the chat, or you can do that via the Google form that is also linked in the chat. So we have those two options for you to be able to participate this evening as we work through this program. So if you have any questions, just pop them in there and we will ask them for you. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the stage over to Logan and Stephanie.
Hi, folks. As Ms. Mirren said, my name is Logan Sparks. I work at the University of Kentucky as an assistant director of admissions for recruitment. It's a mouthful. I specifically work with students who live in Louisville. So I work with all of the public and private schools, high schools there in Jefferson County. And Stephanie, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So my name is Stephanie Dickerson, and I am the program director for our dual credit and our AP Summer Institute at the University of Louisville, as well as I still have some recruitment responsibility for a couple of local schools in the Jefferson County area, Manual being one of them. Some of you all may have just spoke with me about our dual credit program as far as Crimson Scholars Louisville Academy is concerned. So you'll see my face a lot if you are working with dual credit, and then again, too, as you try to make some final college decisions about where you're planning to go after you graduate high school. So happy to be here tonight. All right, so just really quickly before we dive into the great information that Logan and I have for you guys today, brief agenda. So some things that we're going to cover as our presentation is centered around scholarships. We're going to talk about different types of scholarships that you can apply for as you start to get acceptance letters and get into the realm of wondering how you're going to help pay for school, as well as some specifics about competitive scholarships, including the application and review process. We'll also talk a little bit tonight about competitive interviews and kind of what those look like, what you possibly can expect. We'll also talk about scholarship packaging. So that is going to be a very important concept for us tonight as we talk about the different ways you can combine several different types of aid that we'll go through to kind of get this total package, an idea of what your financial situation will look like as you're looking at your different schools. And then we will wrap up by giving you guys some great final tips to remember as you work into applying for your scholarships.
Alrighty, and two guys, I'll just add that you'll notice tonight that Stephanie and I are not really going to go into the nitty gritty details of the scholarships that our institutions offer. And two reasons. One is that it's important to sort of understand scholarships in general before you get into the different institutions and what they offer. And to be really honest with you, the second reason is because our institutions review scholarships every summer. And this year has been so crazy with COVID, and a lot of schools have started offering a test optional option, which means they might have test optional scholarships. So a lot of schools this year kind of like made sort of quick decisions to sort of deal with the chaos of the year, but not just for our specific schools, but I'm anticipating that a lot of scholarship and admissions information is going to sort of be refined this summer after we kind of did this massive switch to test optional and things. So it's kind of another reason why we don't publish it. If you are wanting specific scholarship information regarding our schools, our contact information is listed at the end of the presentation. Shoot us an email, give us a phone call. We'll be happy to walk you through what our schools are offering now, with the caveat that that might change, you know, in the next month or so as we prepare for the next admission cycle. So again, you're not going to hear a ton of specific information about our school specifically. We'll use some anecdotes as examples, but if you want the specific UK or U of L scholarship info, you'll want to reach out to us after this evening. Okay. All right, so the first thing we want to cover are the different types of scholarships. So as you can see on the screen here, there are several. I would say that the most common, or in some ways the most substantial, are going to be the ones that you see, the first four. So academic, competitive, departmental, and selective. So everything is different at every school, which we'll cover here in just a bit. But a lot of times academic scholarships are just based on the student's ACT, GPA, their application. Okay, pretty, you know, usually schools will publish a GPA, a test score requirement on the website, and it's pretty cut and dry. Usually those academic scholarships are. Competitive scholarships generally mean that a student is going to have to do some additional work in order to apply for it. So that might mean an additional section on an application. It might mean a totally separate application entirely, but generally it's going to require extra work. These are exactly how they're described. They are competitive awards. And sometimes they might require an interview. Again, they're going to be extra work. All right. The next one is departmental scholarships. So these are scholarships based on what the student is planning to study. So if you know you want to be an engineering major, you can apply for engineering scholarships. If you know you want to be a nursing major, you can check out to see if they have nursing scholarships. A lot of individual academic departments will offer scholarships that you can apply for, in addition to sort of the general scholarships that come out of our offices. The next category, we call this selective. Sometimes this gets a little bit confusing, but usually selective awards are scholarships that a school is going to give you based on a certain award or designation that you've earned outside of the school, like outside of UK or U of L or whatever school it may be. But because you have achieved that honor, we're going to give you some scholarship money. So the most common of those are going to be National Merit Finalists, National Hispanic Finalists, and finally, any of the governor's schools. So GSP, GSA, or GSE in the state of Kentucky. I would say those are definitely the ones that we run into the most. The next two categories are sort of switching gears a little bit. So outside scholarships are just how they sound. These are scholarships that you are going to apply for outside of an institution. So this might be, I'm trying to think of a good example. This might be a scholarship that your church gives to seniors, so you apply for that scholarship. In Louisville, Norton Healthcare does a fantastic job of giving scholarship to high school seniors. Wick's Pizza, which is a local pizza restaurant, gives out some scholarships to students. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. Another really great resource for students in Louisville is the Community Foundation of Louisville. I'm certain that next year you'll hear your counselors talk about that in great detail. It's a great way to apply for a lot of outside scholarships through one application. So that's really helpful. And then finally, we've got institutional financial aid. So this session is not about financial aid, but it's important to understand that schools and the federal government offer different types of awards. So when you complete the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, that is what makes you considerable for any federal loans and grants That federal grant is called the Pell. You might have heard that term before. It's going to make you considerable for any state grants. So in the state of Kentucky, that's the Kentucky CAP grant. And then finally, it might make you eligible to receive some institutional financial aid. So this is financial aid that comes directly from the institution. So in our case, either UK or U of L, that is in addition to scholarships. Sometimes this is strictly need-based. At UK, it's a combination of need-based and merit-based. It kind of depends on the school. But again, the important thing to know is that it is separate from the scholarships that we offer, and you have to submit a FAFSA in order to be considered for that institutional financial aid in most cases. A lot of private institutions are going to offer a lot of institutional financial aid. So that's something to sort of keep your eye out for if you're applying to private colleges and universities.
All right, so we will now talk a little bit more in depth about the competitive scholarship aspect of the list that Logan just ran down, because we know that a lot of you guys will be looking into competitive scholarships, going through this application process, as most of you are going to be those academically rigorous students who are going to be pursuing some of these higher awards at different institutions. So the first thing, like kind of Logan already highlighted, is that normally the application process for a competitive scholarship is going to be separate from the general admissions application. So you may qualify for like those academic awards right off jump from just doing the admissions application, but normally there's like a separate application, or there's like a tab within like your portal that you can look at that'll tell you everything you qualify for. And those are going to be things that you do have to submit separately, and that also may have a different deadline. So as you're thinking about competitive scholarship applications, just make sure you are cognizant of whatever school it is that you're looking at's deadline, because as there are going to be a lot of students who, may be able to qualify for the competitive awards, most of our institutions are very strict when it comes to deadlines. So if you have a school whose deadline is December 15th and you turn it in December 16th, chances are they're going to tell you, we're sorry, like just because of the number of students we have, we cannot take late applications. So just make sure, whether that's you're keeping track of that in a planner on your phone, that you are making sure you complete those applications by their due date. Okay. So the initial review process, how do you decide who gets an interview? So typically there's going to be a committee that is involved with the competitive scholarship review process. If that is like one of the awards that don't require you to like do essay resume or something like that, then we're just looking at your academic profile separate. Those will be how those are initially determined. But if there's a committee, normally they'll look at essay, resume, letters of recommendations, have some kind of scoring and ranking system that their institution is using, and then they will go based on that. So as you start to look through this, apply for competitive scholarships, just make sure you're also looking through that institution's website, because a lot of times there will be some insight into the review materials that they use. So whether that is a rubric that they're using to score their resume, or some sample essay prompts, or like some sample essays that have been successful. The other thing you just want to make sure you utilize too is your admissions counselor. So like myself or Logan, if you are like confused about what you should be anticipating to turn in because you want to put your best foot forward in that initial review process, you can utilize us, whether that, is looking through your resume ahead of time, looking through your essay, if you have like a draft, want to know you're on the right track. That's what your admissions counselors are for, and all the institutions that you're going to. So just make sure you're using them. In your essay, a lot of my students have asked, how do I make myself stand out? So if if Logan's like me, we spend time every year reading essay after essay after essay after
It's
essay.
so grueling.
Yes. So we like to have essays to kind of break up some of that monotony. So just make sure you are trying to put your own kind of spin or like unique perspective on the essay prompt while still answering the question. Most important, to answer the question, but still trying to bring your personality into that, talking through any type of like personal experiences you've had that directly connect you to the topic, just wanting to make sure that it's something at the end of the day, after, we've read 50,000 essays, that it's something that we will be able to go back and say, I remember this student did this mission trip and got this stuff out of that mission trip that directly relates to like why they should, or why we'd want a student like this at our school. So thinking through your essay. Don't just the night before, like slap something together. Really put some time, energy, and effort into making a draft, making a plan, before you then begin to just start writing. Because it's very easy to kind of get lost as you are thinking about which directions to go with your essay. So outlines and drafts are going to be very, very, very important. Same thing kind of goes for your resume. How do I know what to include in my resume? So a lot of us want to see what we call the well-rounded student, right? So we want somebody who is going to have the academic credential, which most of you are going to have if you obviously qualify for competitive scholarship. But we also want to see some qualities like leadership. Have you had any type of things you've been involved in at school that have highlighted your ability, to lead, or your stick-to-itiveness? Maybe you've been in the beta club for like 4 years, and that shows some serious dedication, right? To know you're going to have that stick-to-itiveness if we give you this scholarship to persist through your college degree. So highlighting things like that about yourself. Now, we do have some students, especially at Manual, because the academic content is rigorous. You guys are spending like hours and hours doing homework, especially if you're one of those MST kids. I'm a Manual grad, y'all, so I know. I remember what it was like to be, hours and hours of homework, and then you're wondering like, well, Miss Stephanie, Miss Logan, what if I didn't have time to like be involved in all these extracurricular activities because of all of the academic, responsibility that I had to still be successful in school? That is okay. Do not think that, just because you don't have 5,000 clubs like somebody over here, if you even have just one thing you stuck to for the whole time you were in high school, and you can show like some progression of responsibility within that one thing, that still goes a very long way to check those boxes we talked about as far as leadership, dedication, and that progression that you've made through the organization. You can even include volunteer experience, because as many of your clubs require you to have a certain number of volunteer hours. You can even put that on your resume to highlight, like, even though I maybe wasn't president of this organization within my school, I did these things outside of school that, really also shows that well-rounded kind of student aspect. So, don't panic, don't get discouraged if you don't have like this Rolodex of items to like roll off on your resume. It is perfectly okay. Like I said, as long as you're kind of just showing that stick-to-itiveness, that dedication, some type of leadership responsibility, in addition to your academic clout, you're going to check all the boxes as far as what people are looking for on a resume. The last point, letters of recommendation. So this is also, and I actually was working with a student from one of my schools, and, a letter of recommendation can honestly make or break an application for a lot of folks. So just make sure as you're choosing who you want to write a letter for you, that it's somebody that, one, I would always recommend you give a copy of your resume to, because that teacher is probably going to have lots of people who have asked them, and always is a great place for them to kind of see what you've been involved with, what you've been doing, so they can have concrete examples of things they can include in that recommendation letter. And it's going to be able to have it be personalized to you, what your strong suits are and things like that. So I had a great student, amazing GPA, amazing resume, and I got this letter of recommendation, and it was like this big. So I reached out to him and was like, hey, we really want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward for our Porter Scholarship Program. Is there anybody else you can ask to give me a letter of recommendation as I'm reviewing this stuff? Because I don't ever want a student to be slighted or anything like that because the person that they relied on for a recommendation didn't, write the kind of robust type of recommendations we normally want to see. So be very careful, explain to the teacher how important the program is. Sometimes it's even helpful too to give them a description of the program. So if there's like certain qualities within that program that they're looking for, they can clearly see that outline in that description you give them. So they make sure they highlight those qualities about you as they're writing your recommendation letter as well. Also equally important, give your recommender plenty of time. Don't go to your teacher like the week before it's due, especially if it's a teacher everybody likes, and everybody's going to want them to write their recommendation letter. So as soon as you're applying for a program that requires a recommendation letter, I would recommend going to that teacher immediately, giving them a date that you want it by, making sure if you don't have it, you're checking in with them, because that's another thing. You never want to miss your deadline because a recommender didn't turn their recommendation in by your date. I have several students that happened to last year. And again, because there are so many folks who are going to be applying, the pool is very competitive. Applications late because of a recommendation, most schools do still consider it to be late. So just make sure you give your recommender plenty of time with your recommendation. So Logan, I miss anything?
Well, one last thing, and Stephanie's going to chuckle because she knows I always get on my high horse about this. But when it comes to essays, keep in mind, guys, that when you are applying for a competitive scholarship, especially when there are requirements to even apply, like an ACT or a GPA or whatever it may be, keep in mind that your academic profile and probably your list of activities are going to look similar to a lot of other students.
Mm-hmm.
So that essay is your opportunity to really make yourself stand out. And you're like, well, Logan, what exactly do you mean by that? For example, I'll give you an essay question that we had a couple years ago at UK. It was, this is kind of the short version, but basically the question was, what is one piece of technology that you think the world would be better off without, and why? And I swear, y'all, I think probably 80% of the essays that I read, just me alone, and my colleagues were reading the same kind, they either talked about cell phones or social media. And I can't say that I necessarily disagree, but you can imagine as the reader, the evaluator, if all I'm doing is reading essay after essay that is talking about, you know, social media and cell phones and texting, anything beside that is going to jump out at me because it's so different. So it's important to not always write about the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe sit with that question a little bit. Maybe talk to your parents, you know, like talk to your family members, talk to your friends, talk to your teachers, and sort of like brainstorm. I'll give you an example of one of the best responses to that question. I had a student from Louisville who he wrote about how in there's a region in India where they don't have enough farmland to grow the you know, to meet the demands of the food that they need, but they have tons and tons of cemeteries. So his essay was kind of talking about how, you know, if we could if we could figure out a new way to sort of deal with cemeteries, then we could maybe have some really rich farmland that would support our community. So it was kind of out of the box, but it answered the question and it immediately grabbed my attention. And that student was awarded our most competitive scholarship. So that's like a really sort of out there example, but it really illustrates what we mean by stepping out of the box and not thinking about the first thing that comes to mind. So keep that in mind when you're doing essays.
Yeah, and like Logan said too, just with the not coming to the thinking or doing the first thing comes to your mind, it also shows us you took the real time, are really interested in this scholarship, to take moments to stew before you just submit, you know, anything that you initially wrote. So it definitely shows some seriousness to us as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. The next step often in a competitive scholarship process is an interview. So typically what will happen is schools will do an initial review, and then they'll invite a certain percentage or a certain number, or schools sort of make those decisions differently, but they'll invite a certain group of students to interview from that first initial review. These sort of take place in a lot of different environments. Some scholarship interviews are a 20-minute interview, you go to campus and you leave. Some interviews at some schools, it might be a 2-day event where you interview and then maybe you visit with some different programs, and then maybe they give you and your family tickets to an athletic event. Or, I mean, they really run the gamut of how they're conducted. Some interviews are panels, so it would be, you know, 2 or 3 individuals. They're usually faculty or staff members who you sit and talk with. Sometimes it includes an activity, maybe a problem-solving activity, or maybe you're interviewed in groups. So it might be a couple of different students who are interviewing for that scholarship, and you're all sitting there together. That's another way some schools do it. And some schools even ask you to prepare a presentation as part of your interview. So there are tons of different ways where you can, that we sort of evaluate in person or this year, all of our interviews were done via Zoom, of course. But there are all these different ways that schools evaluate you and your application in that sort of next step. Now, the key to being successful in competitive scholarship interviews is really quite simple. And you're going to be like, come on, that's not true, because they are competitive awards. And, you know, if you're invited to an interview, you're probably going to be one of several, one of many who's interviewing. So I understand that can be really stressful and very nerve-wracking, but it's important to just be yourself and be flexible. I know at UK, when you come to interview for our most prestigious award, you sit down with a faculty member and a staff member, and they really just ask you questions about yourself, what you're interested in, what you'd like to get involved in when you go to college, how you know, what you want to major in, and what you see as your dream career. I mean, pretty easy stuff. I mean, you know, it's not easy to know exactly what you want to do at 17 years old, but, you know, we just kind of talk about yourself. So it's just important to sort of take a deep breath and be yourself, be flexible. So especially if you're working in an interview where it's a group of people or you're asked to do an activity, be flexible and show that you can be calm in a bunch of different situations. That's important. And then finally, expect the unexpected. Some schools might try to stump you with a weird question, or they might, you know, ask you to sort of put yourself in a scenario that you weren't expecting, or some schools like to see how you handle that sort of under pressure kind of environment. Some schools want to see, especially if it's in a group interview, they want to see how you're interacting with other students. So again, every interview is different. The important thing to always do is that if you get invited to interview for one of these scholarships, you can always ask the admissions office or the scholarship office, whoever you're dealing with. It might be me or Stephanie, someone who's in our role. Just say, hey, Logan, like, can you tell me what this interview is going to be like? Like, so I can kind of like prepare myself for what, you know, what to expect. And in most cases, they're going to tell you and be really upfront with you about what you can expect. So if you had asked me that question, what can I expect? I would have told you just what I just told you. They're just going to ask you about yourself. No sweat. Take a deep breath. It'll be fine. Easy as that. So always ask, say, what am I going to be expected to do? Do I need to prepare anything? And they're probably going to be pretty upfront with you about that. So keep that in mind. Stephanie, anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think you hit most of it. You know,
All right.
even though the group interviews might not be like a common thing, it does happen. I know one of our programs on campus, our MLK Scholars program, does group interviews. So they, and like Logan said, expect the unexpected. One of the activities they did was like gave everybody a role. You were all stranded on this island and you had to figure out who, based on their jobs, like you were going to put on the boat, and like wanted to see like what people came up with. And so there are definitely like, you know, some more thought-provoking type of scenarios. They had this whole way they like scored and like figured out what, you know, people's responses were, but ultimately seeing how people work together. So that's just an example of one of ours that does utilize that group format. But like Logan said, always be yourself. They're going to be able to tell from a mile away if you're trying to be somebody or not, or you're trying to like, you know, be this, like I said, just be the best you can be, because that's ultimately what they want to see when they're trying to decide who is going to get those scholarships. So, all right. So the next thing we'll roll into is the scholarship package. So essentially, as I kind of mentioned, as we roll through the agenda items, this is going to be very, very, very important when you are thinking about in total the ways that you can afford and pay for school, right? A lot of people have this preconceived notion that there's a such thing as a full ride scholarship, and I want that full ride scholarship, and it's going to be this one big award that just pays for everything, right? Well, in all actuality, a lot of people are going to be adding up different components to get to that total cost of attendance, or, you know, to pay for their education. So it's going to be very important to make sure that as you're competing for these awards, you may not always be awarded the flat out, here's your full tuition plus all your money that you need to pay for everything else. But to also not be discouraged by that, because even if you're given, this scholarship here, you have this institutional aid, you got this grant, you have your keys money, like it's all about making sure you have the total view of everything you are using from a monetary standpoint to help pay for school. So a lot of things that come into play when you're thinking about a scholarship package. One of those is going to be the concept of stacking scholarships. So most schools are going to be very transparent with what you can and cannot stack. So this may be like if you have the admissions office, where like for us, our scholarship awards are housed in the admissions office for the academic ones. You're only going to be able to get one academic scholarship, right? It's always going to be the one that's the highest. So if you were given, like, for example, for us, like a trustees award, but then you applied for a porter and your porter award was higher than your trustees, we're going to give you the higher award. So we're not going to give you like the $8,000 academic award you maybe got plus your full tuition porter plus 5,000 or whatever porter award you were given. So it's always going to be the higher award when you're thinking about like those academic based awards. The same thing comes into play with like, GSPs, GSA, GSEs, those all kind of round out in there. So we're always going to give you the one that is the most. So if you have a school that has a specific scholarship that does let you stack, for example, we have an enhancement award that you can stack, or if you're getting departmental awards from like the engineering school or the College of Business or things like that, those can then be stacked most times on top of your academic award that was given to you by a different office. So, just be cognizant of making sure you understand. And if you have questions about what is going to stack, what are you going to like be looking at in the long run, just ask us. A lot of us are trained to be able to at least look and know a little bit about financial aid and scholarship stacking. Now, if we get into some of the nitty gritty or stuff about like FAFSA and verification, we're going to normally scoot you right on over to the financial aid office. But like that basic concept of us being able to look at your money, tell you what you can stack, tell you what you're looking for from that aspect, we normally can answer those questions for you. So don't hesitate to ask us. A lot of you all, like Logan mentioned, as outside scholarships are concerned, if you're getting things from like Humana or Community Foundation of Louisville or Brown-Forman or things like that, there is a process you want to make sure you look up on that school's website to see how you then send that money to them. Depending on the amount of the scholarship, some organizations will dispense the money directly to you and just, trust that you're going to like use it for your education. Others will want to make sure they send their check directly to the school. So a lot of times on the school's financial aid website, there's normally a category that talks about where and how to send your outside scholarship awards. Make sure you're including all the information. If it asks for what term you're needing to use the money for, your student ID number, that you give all of that to the person who's going to be sending the award over. We definitely don't want there to be any ambiguity in like how we're needing to apply, your money that you're getting from any outside institution. And just, like Logan said, she said she got on the soapbox earlier. I'm going to get on this one little soapbox right here. Just make sure that as you're thinking about this and the ways that universities have, had to kind of pivot and change some of their standards this past year, and I know for us, we're rolling on to still use our test optional policy for fall of 2022. This significantly impacted our scholarship pool with making a lot of students eligible for aid this year. So, I mean, in a normal year, I maybe would have looked at like 50 trustee applications. This past year, I read about 150 competitive trustees applications, and that was across like 30 of us reading applications. So just to give you guys an idea of the magnitude of the competitive pool that came in as schools pivoted into offering test optional student scholarship money. So just know that we're trying, the best we can with the resources we're giving, the way that we've had to kind of edit and modify our requirements to still make sure that we're giving you what you deserve, what you've earned by being this academically successful and involved students that I know most of you guys are. So if you ever do, like I said, they'll have concern or issue with, wondering how do you stand out in this really big competitive pool, or like if you're given an award and you have questions about like why you weren't, awarded X, Y, and Z, we're always here. We're real people. We're not scary. We want to help you. We want to make sure you really have a good idea of kind of how the awarding process went, just so that way, you can feel comfortable in knowing that, how we evaluated you and why your award was what it was. So.
Absolutely. One thing really quickly I want to mention to sort of underscore what you've already said, Stephanie, about creating a package. And as she mentioned, the awards, those full ride scholarships are so few and far between, y'all. I mean, At UK, our most prestigious scholarship is called the Singletary, and we had 2,000 students who were eligible for that this year, which is more than ever before, and 25 students were offered that particular scholarship. So that just shows you how competitive those really big, sort of all-encompassing awards are. They're super competitive, and they're just fewer and far in between. So the analogy that I like to use is going fishing. If you are trying to, let's say, serve dinner at your giant family reunion, and you're going to go out and catch fish to fry, okay? You're not going to go out on a boat and drop one line and get all the fish you need to feed the whole family reunion fish fry. You're going to have to be out there getting in your boat and dropping your line a lot of times to catch a lot of fish in order to feed the family reunion. It's the same with scholarship. You got to drop your line when and wherever you can to hopefully catch a fish, catch a scholarship. You got to really be intentional about applying for every single thing that you possibly can in hopes that you see return on a handful of them, and those kind of come together to create a scholarship package for you. So it's really important that you're applying for everything. And I'll let you in on a little secret. If you're reusing an essay, if you're applying to a scholarship at UK and then you're applying to a scholarship at U of L, and you can kind of take the same essay and augment it, edit it a little bit to fit the question or to fit the prompt or whatever it is, I'm not going to know. I don't call up Stephanie and say, hey, did little Sally use the same exact essay? We don't do that. We don't care. We don't have time for that. So keep that in mind. Be smart about how you're working, and you copy and paste that essay all day long as you're being careful about making sure that it's answering the question and doing all of that. It's not uncommon that I read an essay where someone says, I would really like to be admitted to the University of Louisville.
Yes, that was going to be what I was going to say next. Make sure you change the school name.
Make sure you change the school name. Exactly. Make sure you change the school name, and you always read back through it and make sure you've made the proper edits. But if you use the same essay for a couple of different school, applications, we don't care. It's no big deal. We know that this is the stressful process. We get it. So keep that in mind, but you're going to have to go fishing a lot. You're going fish and fish and fish to hopefully catch a lot of scholarships to create a package. Speaking of fish, I forgot that this photo was in here. All right, guys. So a couple of things to remember. Stephanie has already mentioned this. Deadlines are so important, particularly at large institutions like UK and U of L. We stick so strictly to those deadlines because if we don't, and if we let one person sort of cheat the system, that means we have to let hundreds of kids cheat the system. So we don't allow it at all. If the deadline is midnight, you better have that application in by 11:59. Okay. That is so important. Another thing to keep in mind is that this is kind of connected to my spiel at the end here, but every school does everything differently. And that is sort of the curse of the work that we do. For example, our scholarship and admissions sort of early action deadline is December 1st. Stephanie, I think yours is January.
Normally it's December 15th, but we extended it January 15th this past year. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So December 1st versus December 15th. I can count on more than two hands how many students over the years have called me and said, well, Logan, I got it in on the 14th of December. And I have to say, I think you confused our deadline with U of L's. We have a different deadline. And I don't like to do that. Okay. I hate doing that. So make sure that you're paying attention to the deadlines and don't assume that just because U of L does it a certain way or UK does it a certain way or Western or whoever it is, don't just assume that everybody kind of does it the same, because everybody does everything differently. Again, it is the curse of our profession. It makes your job difficult and it makes our job difficult. But keep in mind that it's really important. And another thing, and this is probably especially pertinent to UK and U of L, if you've got a question or you want to clarify some information, you come directly to us. This is a Kentucky pun, but you come straight to the horse's mouth, and I will tell you exactly what's going on, what you need to know. The number of times I talk to students and they say, well, my mom's friend who went to UK 30 years ago told me this, or my sister's best friend from high school went to U of L and she said it's done this way. No. We all know how things get lost in the shuffle, and information sort of changes as it passes from one person to the next. If you have a question, you talk directly to us or directly to your counselors there at school. They're fantastic. You have a great resource in your counselors. So ask them, ask us directly, because we will tell you the what's what, and we'll give you the exact information that you need to know. Okay. Again, Kentucky pun, remember this, straight from the horse's mouth, we will tell you all of the exact information. Stephanie, do you have anything to add? I think this is our last slide.
I don't think so, because Logan's saying, just ask us if you have questions. That feeds directly into the weighted GPAs versus unweighted and test scores. Some of us use scores, some of us don't. Some of us use weighted GPAs, some of us don't. So just make sure, like Logan said, you're asking if you want the information and it's not like readily out there online for you to be able to find that. So yeah, I think that is about it.
Absolutely. We often joke in this job that ask us directly, that's job security for us. So all right. Okay, Miss Mirren, I think we're ready for questions. I'm gonna, I have a slide here that shows our contact information. I'm gonna leave that up while we're going through some questions.
Perfect. It looks like we have a couple of different questions here that have been asked, and we have a couple of minutes, so perfect timing. We have one question that is when referring to the stacking or non-stacking of scholarships. GSA and music scholarships are stackable, correct?
In most cases, because a music scholarship is going to be departmental, most schools will probably let you stack that. Yeah.
Same for us.
Awesome. And then another question was, do STAMPS scholarships usually include an interview?
What was the first part? What kind of scholarship?
STAMPS, STAMPS.
Logan, do you know what a STAMP scholarship is?
I'm not sure. I don't.
No, I don't think we're familiar
I don't
with
think
terminology.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
UK and U of L don't have STAMPS affiliations. So it's different colleges. So you got to look for that. It's an incredible scholarship, but I can tell you, University of Miami has STAMPS. I feel like one of the Michigan schools has STAMPS. I can't remember, but it's a huge scholarship. So if you're looking for that, just kind of research the STAMPS affiliated schools, and maybe you can find out which schools have the STAMPS scholarship.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. I was like, oh Lord, I have no idea what that is.
I don't know what that is. In general, I will say this. In general, the more significant the award, the higher the likelihood that there will be an interview.
Yes.
So at UK, our Singletary is our biggest award monetarily. It requires an interview. A lot of those mentored scholarships at U of L, a lot of those are going to require an interview and different things. So again, the bigger the award, the higher the likelihood that there might be an interview.
And our colleague Jazzmine from Bellarmine just said yes, that they do have interviews for STAMPS.
Yes.
Okay.
So that kind of helps guide you, and definitely as you're going through the scholarship process, make sure you read the criteria. You are being very careful when you are looking at the essays, making sure you're answering those questions, because there are lots of different just one key word that you may miss if you're not reading carefully, and those deadlines will get you if you're not careful. And there are a lot of different ones. So please make sure you keep good records for yourself, so that you can make sure that you are applying and putting yourself in the pot for all of the opportunities that you could be eligible for. So it is right now 6:45. We are right on time this evening. Like I said, or like I've said at all of the sessions, the Q&A document is going to be available for students to kind of ask questions later on. And we will reach out to our colleagues and the universities to get those questions answered for you if we're unable to answer them. So please make sure as you're reviewing this that you do double check, or that you do ask the questions, and we'll make sure we take care of that. And it looks like we have just one more quick question about do most scholarships use weighted GPA? And are they also test optional? That's a big thing right now. So if we could.
Yeah. So again, a lot of schools this year switched to test optional that had never been test optional before, because so many ACT test dates were getting canceled because of COVID and things. So UK and U of L, we were both schools that did test optional, and we are both also schools that have committed to test optional for the foreseeable future. In a lot of cases, if the school has a test optional option for admissions, they're probably going to have a test optional sort of criteria for scholarships as well. So UK, for example, if you were to hop on our scholarships website right now, you would see in some nice charts, it'll say traditional criteria versus test optional criteria. In terms of weighted versus unweighted GPAs, that is going to depend on the school. At UK, we strictly use an unweighted GPA. Now, that doesn't mean we don't take into account your AP courses, because I know many of you all are involved in AP or even dual credit. We still take that stuff into account, but we are looking at your unweighted GPA. I think, Stephanie, you all might be a little bit different.
Yeah, so U of L does use weighted GPAs. So this is again where we talked about making sure you communicate with your counselor. So yeah, for us, we do use your weighted GPA, and then we're even, because I know ACT is starting to revisit the whole concept of being able to retake only a section of the ACT,
Yes.
that we will start utilizing some super scoring criteria as well, probably in the next school year that's coming up. So we're kind of working on that right now. Nothing's out officially about it, but we are looking into ways we can now work with ACT with them, now looking at being able to take one portion and doing some super scoring as well.
Mm-hmm. So in some cases, when you're deciding to apply test optional or not, in a lot of cases, you might find that you are eligible for more scholarship if you don't submit your test score, which I think a lot of people kind of feel like is a little counterintuitive. Or you might find that you are going to be eligible for more scholarship with your ACT score. So it's really important. Again, that's why we're here. We want to make sure that you're doing what's best for you in terms of increasing your chances for as much money as possible.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Logan, because we had some stuff, like you said, where you had to have a certain GPA if you were test optional to be qualified for scholarships. And then if you apply with your test score and then put that test score and that GPA requirement on there. So it's kind of like this little area in between where you really had to make a very good decision about whether you wanted to submit your scores or you didn't want to submit your scores, because maybe that opened up some other scholarship opportunities. So yeah, that was a really good point.
Yes, so read those scholarship information very carefully as you're making those decisions. And we had one more question that I think is probably a U of L specific question, but it is, would you be able to stack scholarships for programs like GEMS?
So no, that's a really good question. So our GEMS program, which is our guaranteed entrance to medical school, and then we also have a ULE program, which is the dental school equivalent. There's actually not a monetary component to those. So GEMS and ULE are going to be specifically for after you graduated with your bachelor's degree, you've taken your MCAT, you've gotten a certain score, you have an automatic seat in our, medical school, or for dental school, an automatic seat in the dental school. So that is more of a programmatic type of award, but not like a monetary tie to it. So if you got GEMS and you also were like a Brown fellow, then like you would get the full tuition plus the $8,000, and you'd have the GEMS designation, which would just kind of guarantee your seat within our medical school. So you definitely can add another scholarship program onto it because there's a monetary portion to GEMS.
The value in that is stress relief, right?
Yes, the value in that is the fact that you know you already got one medical school acceptance as long as you do well on your MCAT. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. We always love having you join us and sharing all of this amazing information with our students. And they are a wealth of knowledge. So please make sure if you have any interest in any of the programs that you reach out to your admissions representative for that university, whether it be UK or U of L or whichever university it is. They are your go-to with the most up-to-date, most current information. And they're also a part of the decision-making process. So they want to know you and know that you want to be at their university. So they are a very important part of your application process. So thank you, ladies, so much for joining us this evening. We are going to close down this live session, and we will be back on the other YouTube link to be able to have our second session this evening, which will start here in about 10 minutes. So come back and join us at that one.
Thank you all for having us.